Hello. Hello. How's it
How you
going?
doing, Andy?
Yeah, very good, thank you. I think we need some holding music in that little period of time. A little jingle, some description.
Some little soft jazz,
We
some
are
lift
starting to get
music.
more- yeah, some lift music. We're starting to get a little bit more with the production values here with the holding card. So it would be great to have some kind of little kind of BBC News kind of countdown kind of thing, if you know what I mean.
Beep,
Yeah,
beep, beep,
yeah,
beep.
exactly. And we can get our
Bang.
papers out ready. Yeah. Anyway, how's it going with you?
Really good. I mean, we're gearing up for Christmas at Master and Rock, so things are completely mad.
Yeah.
But in a good way, you know. We are
Advent calendar central.
yes. Advent calendars are a thing.
Yes.
24 drams in the box rather than 5. There's a pour and sip advent calendar. There's a tasty discount on that in the member store.
We had that last year as well, didn't we?
I'm not sure we actually made one last year. We've certainly had them before. Yeah. We have them again.
We have them again. There you go, guys.
It's almost like we planned that, Andy. That was ideal little pitch there.
I'm trying to find the start of the chat from this week. So all of you guys, all in the comments already. Chris Leno saying good evening. All the regulars still here. Steve Coleman Williams, Real Boingo, welcome everybody. Jeffster, Pete Barrett. It's just like putting an old pair of jeans, this one. It's just like, you know, all these names, and you're just like, what a lovely evening this is going to be.
Exactly, yeah. We've got Peter Gilmore. I don't know if you missed any. I don't know if I'm repeating you now.
Yeah. Mike Pizarro as well. Benromach is one of my favourite distilleries. I love how savoury it can taste.
He also says he's back from his pour and sip sabbatical, so he's looking forward to tonight.
Oh, a pour and sip sabbatical, hey?
Must have skipped a month. Yeah, must have been away.
Yeah, I skipped a month as well. And yeah, so anyway, what's going on tonight, Jake? What are we? Oh, wait a second. Steve Conway is saying we actually got the holding screen this time. We don't normally, and join in.
We're getting better. It's getting smoother. Yeah, it's a newfangled thing, and we're getting used to it.
Soon, by next year, I'm telling you, that holding cards will be. We'll have the music, fireworks, it'll be great. So talk us through tonight, Jake. What are we doing?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we've sort of, it's been a bit in the comments about it, but we've got the order for tonight is we've got the Benromach Contrasts Virgin Oak. We've got the Isle of Raasay, which is the Columbian Oak, which is super cool, and we've got from the Heart Cut, Cotswolds, was it a 5-year-old, and is their 6th release. So yeah, we're going in ascending strength order.
And we kind of are, well, I suppose with the 2 drams at the end, so we'll have interviews with our amazing guests that we're going to have, but then at the end, me and Jake will do a very quick whistle-stop tour of the other 2 drams, the Jimmy Rack and the Maclean's Nose. But that Jimmy Rack really will fly right to the top, won't it? That's 61.1%. And then come back down. Maclean's Nose at 46%.
Well, I think Maclean's Nose, if you want to enjoy that one, that's probably one for another day after these 3. But these 3 have a bit of a theme as well, Andy. I don't know if you've clocked it.
What 3? Sorry.
The 3 that we're tasting tonight with the
3 that we're tasting tonight. Theme is that they are all whiskies.
You're getting there.
Nice.
No, I think they are all fresh oak.
Okay. Yes, Virgin Oak, Columbian Oak.
So it'll be interesting to work our way through some of the similarities, but the differences as well. Yeah.
Okay, so lots of chat about wood tonight.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Right, that sounds good. Guys, are you all ready to go? I think they are.
They're ready to rock.
I think they're all ready. I think they're bored of this preamble. I think they want to start drinking whiskey. So we should probably invite our first guest on.
Let's do it. Let's bring in Luke.
There you go. Good evening, guys.
Good evening, Luke. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Not too bad, thank you. Whereabouts are we speaking to you from today?
It's from, I'd say sunny Worcestershire, but now it's dark, so so just smack bang in the middle, is just south of Birmingham.
Oh, nice. Sunny Worcestershire, something that people don't often say. So, for those, we've got 3 new guests now. I've never been on Pour and Sip before. So for those that don't know you, talk to us a little bit about yourself and your journey into the industry and how you found yourself in your current role.
Yeah, so currently I work as the regional sales manager in the UK for Gordon and MacPhail. Gordon and MacPhail, many people will know as independent bottlers, also the owners of Benromach distillery and our new distillery, Cairn, which is based in Granton-on-Spey. I joined now the whisky industry, like 14 and a half years ago. So started my career working with a company called Maclean, which is the joint distribution company for sort of Jim Beam Global and Edrington at the time. So looked after a variety of whisky brands over the years, from sort of Maclean and Highland Park, and Lefroy, Benromach, etc. A number of Japanese whiskies, Yamazaki, Kikuchi, Hibiki, etc. Many of you will be familiar with both portfolios. Did a first stint of my career predominantly within the on-trade, so looked after a number of sort of bars and hotels and pubs up and down the left and breadth of the country, before moving into my role as a sales executive, really with Gordon and MacPhail about 7.5 years ago. And focused then more on the retail side of things, really. So sort of left the sort of on trade behind as I got a bit older and couldn't hanging out in bars anymore, and actually moved to the States of mortgage, kids, etc. Sort of settled nicely into the comfort of retail. So now look after the UK sales and distribution for not only Gordon and MacPhail, sort of independent bottlings, but also Benromach, as well, which we now have a distribution partner set up with Cask Liquid Marketing to do for us within the UK. But sort of still get to sort of stick my 2 pence in every now and again, and sort of get sort of wheeled out occasionally for tasting. So glad to be part of this evening. To
wheeled out indeed, to give your 2 pence tonight. Wheeled out. So, but anyone who doesn't know about distillery, I think we've had a couple of Benromachs on before, but it's an old distillery. It dates back to 1898, and there's been a lot of ups and downs in the history of the distillery. Do you want to just talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, very much so. It was quite funny. I had a little glance at your card earlier, and it said about the distillery being established in 1900, stuff like that. So as you said, 1898 was the sort of official date stuff for it to be sort of built.
I don't write cards. If I wrote,
started laying down and stuff like that, and at that sort of particular time, back in 1900 and 1901. But it was a fairly sort of quick open and close. And I suppose it sort of got into a little bit more of a stride really around the sort of 1960s. It had a nice sort of silent period, sort of from the early 30s, but from the sort of 60s, got into its stride a little bit more. Sort of creating a style of space cider whiskey that would be very, very familiar to most, sort of malty and honey and sherry, etc. It's a very, very small distillery, so I mean we currently have two stills, 7,500 litres and stuff that spirit and wash, so quite a small size. But sort of prior to that, it ended up really being owned by United Distillers, so Diageo as were, who ended up mothballing the distillery, its last fillings from 1983 because of its sort of small size. We can talk about it a bit. That small size didn't really lend itself to being fully functional. Sort of back in the early 80s and stuff, there was a bit of a downturn within the whisky industry, as many people will be well aware. So it got sort of muffled and lay dormant for 10 years. Sort of during that time, Gordon and MacPhail, as independent bottlers, many of you will be familiar with, I'd always wanted to own their own distillery. The distillery, for those that don't know, is based in a little place called Forres, which is about sort of 25 minutes or so as the crow flies and stuff from Elgin, just in between Inverness and Elgin. And the distillery had come up for sale, and the family decided, as it was close, that they would invest and rebuild and bring the distillery back to life. And that's where things, I guess, get a little bit sort of more interesting for the story. They had a wonderful selection of cask samples, really, with Gordon MacPhail, right the way back at the time, so it was 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, 30s, right the way back to a number of generations. And when trying to look at the style of the distillery, they didn't want to bring back what was previous. They wanted to focus on something a little bit more sort of unique for the market. And once they'd gone through a number of those samples, right the way back through, they found prior to the 1960s that there were a number of Speyside whiskies and samples and distilleries where you'd often find a little bit of smoke, sort of characteristic, a little bit of peat smoke running through, the whiskies. Now, if you kind of fast forward sort of today, there's not many people, and even back in the 90s, if you mention Speyside whiskies to people, smoke and peat is not something that really, would be a focus for people. You leave that more on islands and over on islands.
You're taking my question. Like, hold on one second. I need to ask this question before you ask
By
it.
the way.
I've written it down here, and I'm going to go straight over it. So I want to ask it because I wrote it down. When the distillery restarted, you wanted to create a classic Speyside taste. What is this?
Yeah, so the classic taste, this is what I sort of alluded to, was that pre-1960s style. So by a classic style of Speyside and like that, it was a little bit more of a pre-1960s style. So that was that element and stuff of peat being used, and there were a number of reasons and stuff. Through time of that being the case during sort of war times and things when some certain things were rationed. Fuel and things. Peat was a much cheaper sort of source of fuel and stuff, so it was being utilised and stuff a little bit more sort of by distilleries and ultimately by burning peat. When you're sort of using that in kilns to dry out the grains, that then imparts and stuff, a much more interesting sort of flavour profile within those grains. So ultimately, what they ended up was with this slightly smoky style. It's around about 12 parts per million for those that want to know. So very,
someone's
very light.
Definitely going to ask. So yeah, good.
But it's it's a Highland peat, so very, very different from Isla peat. Isla peat, you'll look at a lot more sort of broken down sort of vegetal matter, a lot more sort of iodine. You get a lot more sort of minerality and stuff from coastal sort of maturation, all sort of affecting that bigger peat reek, etc. And what you find really with Highland peat is much more simple, but it's generally trees, so lignans and gorse and heather, so a much simpler, more kind of I suppose a floral smoke that's generated. So on the nose, really, for anything that we do with Benromach, with that element of peat running through, it's very, very simple. A little bit more like bonfire and campfire smoke.
Is that on every release you have? It's like always part of the
for the core range. Yeah, I mean, aside from the organic addition we do, which is also part of the contrast range that doesn't feature any peat as the core variant. The 10 and the 12 and the 15 cast strengths, the 21s. All of those stuff have an element, of that sort of 12 ppm running through. So that just that nice little bit of wisp of smoke, should we say?
Cool. You were talking as well about the courses, like about a smaller distillery, because Benromach places a lot of importance in like the craftsmanship, and it's very small. How's that still achieved today?
Yeah, I mean, sort of we focus on a lot of a message of handcrafted, and that's almost a term that gets banded around quite a lot nowadays. But we have a very small team of distillers that's led by a man called Keith Cruikshank, who's been there since the very beginning for us, and what we don't have is a big state-of-the-art computer-controlled distillery. Everything is done by hand. The weighing, it's a real manual process. Sort of taking the cut, everything is done by sort of sight, by taste. It's a real hands-on, sort of process. We produce around 500,000 litres and stuff a year. So I mean, a very, very small capacity on the grand scheme of things. As I said, two small stills, 7,500 and like 4,500. And we take about 1,000 litres and stuff on the heart as a cut. So the whole process and stuff is very, very manual within there, and that, I suppose that manual side of things just allows us just a little bit more, I suppose, control and influence over the distillers, and their characteristics to go into that whiskey. So we have a part of our process. We have quite a long fermentation, so we get quite a fruity sort of new make, and you'll pick that up. Somebody mentioned, I think earlier, about a slightly sort of savoury element that comes through a little bit sometimes. We also use a combination of distiller's yeast and brewer's yeast that gives a little sort of extra just a complexity to the new make, but overall a nice fruity new make that we can then pop into casks. Now we have a first fill cask policy, at sort of Benromach, and for the core range for the 10s and the 15s that many will be familiar with, we use a combination of first fill bourbon casks and first fill sort of sherry casks, Oloroso sherry casks. But for the one that we've got in the glass this evening, this is a little bit different. So this forms part and parcel of our contrast range.
Talk to us about the contrast range. So we'll move on to what we're drinking tonight.
Yeah, so the contrast range stuff is quite a unique little proposition, and I always sort of say it's a little bit like Keith's Playground. We created this sort of pre-1960s style, and really the 10 really focuses on that for us, the 10 and the 15. But as a small distillery, it's nice to play around with different sort of casks, and nice to play with different sort of finishes, etc. So we started focusing on a contrast range that includes the organic, so as an unpeated organic. We have a heavily peat smoke addition, which is all bourbon cask, but much higher ppm, depending on the batch. We do wine cask finishes from sort of Chateau Cisac, so sort of French, sort of Bordeaux cask, Sassicaia, so Italian to Tuscan, and a whole variety of things. So the one that you've got in the glass being the virgin oak, as you said, this is part of a fresh oak, so a brand new sort of barrel. Now it's American oak. I know we're looking at a few different sort of types of oak and stuff this evening, which is great. So we're starting with an American oak, sort of fresh barrel, lightly sort of toasted, on the inside for this one. And American oak is very sort of a nice, tall, straight, easy to work with nice, easy grain, but also imparts a really nice sort of series of flavours. Again, many people will be familiar with that. There's a naturally occurring chemical called vanillin within the wood itself. So then sort of charring and stuff on the inside of the barrel helps release that, so you get that classic vanilla profile that comes through. The wood is also a little bit more spicy in character, so a little bit of black pepper characteristic can come through from that. So with this particular one, what we find when we put that nice sort of fruity sort of Benromach new make into that sort of fresh cask, not only is it sort of leaching out all that sort of wonderful natural colour, as you said, it's all natural colour, 46% ABV, non-chill filtered, for those that may go on to that. But you'll see this wonderful colour as that's sort of within there. Now it's a lot darker and stuff like that than bourbon cask. Naturally, if anything's had a first of all bourbon cask, they would have leached a huge amount of colour, natural colour out of the barrel before we get it to put sort of new making over into Scotland. So you get this wonderful rich sort of amber colour that comes through on the glass, which you can see. And on the nose, hopefully what you'll pick up is a nice sort of that vanilla characteristic, perhaps a little bit of fruit, a little bit of tropical fruit, almost like sort of banana. We'll come through a little bit on that.
I can tell you what. Because
I was about to say,
nobody's been waiting sort of to get their nose into these glass. So I can tell you a little bit about what people have been getting already. Interestingly, I think like nobody's sort of gone with any smoky descriptors, but it is definitely there. But it's just sort of a subtle edge, isn't it?
It's very, it's very subtle. So
Peter Gilmore's getting bananas and vanilla, real boingers, picking up some caramel, a bit of apple, a dash of ginger.
Yeah.
Clive Hampton's getting a bit of fruitcake, a bit of chocolatey notes. Mike Pizarro is agreeing, like definitely some ginger in here. He's actually getting that savoury edge with some maybe a bit of ginger and soy marinade. Okay. Peter Gilmore's he's onto the palate. He's saying he's getting some orange. And there we go. So the first mention of some smooth smoke and alongside some herbs on the palate.
Yeah.
Malcolm Tucker has getting some sort of like planed oak, kind of like I suppose like shaving kind of note with alongside bananas, soft brown sugar, single cream. So we the area,
brilliant. I mean, I think we will hit the nail on the head with a load of those tasting notes. And I definitely find that note, as I said earlier, with that light toasting, you get that slight kind of wood shavings note for me that comes through a little bit on the nose as well. That sort of pencil shavings, that sort of fresh cut, which is quite nice. But there's a lot of notes in there that would match up exactly and stuff like that to the notes that would come down from our guys as well, which is great to see. So that little element on the palate of that sort of the orange, that sort of Seville orange marmalade that comes through, and what you just find underneath that really subtle underlying element of smoke. There's no big peat reek. There's no big hit of that comes through. It's just this really kind of subtle underlying whisper smoke that comes through from the whiskey.
Oh yeah, I'm on my first sip there during that time. It's definitely like an orange oil thing going for me. It's really, really nice, and then it's kind of like wonderful, creamy, like a vanilla fudge.
Yeah, a butterscotchy note, and
it's not as spicy as I thought it was going to be.
Okay.
It's like quite balanced.
Yeah.
It's definitely it's like a kind of a, I don't know how to say, it's like an oak spice, obviously, but it's not like overpowering.
Yeah, it's that slightly sort of pepper, sort of pepper spice and things that sort of runs underneath. But you're right. I think it's a really, really sort of well balanced whiskey. I mean, I know we've got the little miniatures. I don't know if anybody's seen the sort of bottle itself. It's 10 years old and stuff for those that need to know. Sort of on there, but that's the sort of styling of the contrast with the sort of new branding, and all the contrasts have got sort of different colours sort of on them. Tells you a little bit more. I don't know how far we can kind of zoom in on here, probably not, but it always tells you the year it was sort of bottled, year it was distilled, puts the age sort of on the bottle, so you've got a little bit of information on that, and some great tasting notes at the front. But equally, those mirror a lot of what people have said this evening, so we've obviously got some great palettes and stuff.
They're on the money, yeah.
Ginger as well. It's definitely a ginger spice.
Yeah.
As well there for me. Where did you get up to, Jake? Did you finish?
Well, I can pick up again. Jeffster, I got a whiff of peppermint, which I think is definitely there. Some tobacco. Clive Hampton has been more some butterscotch, and he's got a zing of something. Some more people talking about ginger. Jeffster, I think, said that he has visited the distillery and says very good talk. So there you go.
But no, it's really nice to see. I mean, it's got sort of a wonderful little place. The classic white and red, sort of like colorings across, but everything's as I said, everything's sort of a really, really old school, really old fashioned distillery. So if people have been, glad you enjoyed it. If people haven't been, if you ever do get the chance to go, please please pop in. It's a wonderful little distillery to see. Very, very manual. As I said, there's no big NASA's computer screens and stuff like that behind it.
What about you, Jake? I feel like the smoke I get like very subtly on the nose, not so much on the palate.
Yeah, and I've literally just read another comment from Malcolm Tucker, who said that he wasn't getting the smoke at all at first. He's sort of stepped away for a few minutes, and now he's getting it. It's certainly not up front and in the way of other things.
Yeah. Has anyone added a little bit of water, just out of curiosity, that contains?
Yeah, a couple of people have. There's a couple of mentions saying. Jeffster again mentioned that he doesn't need H2O, but a drop does open it out. So he's tried. So yeah.
I haven't yet.
I haven't felt the need yet, but you always can. Yeah. What would you say, Luke?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely on the nose are quite sort of right. I mean, it sort of tends to open it up a little bit more. Much more of that sort of like sort of fruitiness. Things that go through on the nose. Sometimes with Benromach, what you'll find is the more sort of addition of water, the more that sort of smoke tends to creep to the surface, and that's certainly true with like the 10-year-old especially. A little bit of water with that, even though that one's only 43%. Adding water isn't going to be for everyone's compete, but a little bit of water with that just gets that smokiness to pop to the fore a little bit of fun. So it's interesting to see if that's quite the same on this one for those that want to try it.
Absolutely.
So perhaps, I mean, I'm always one of those things for my own personal palate. A little bit of water, and I love to see sort of things open up on the nose, but I never like to thin the palate out too much. And one of the things with Benromach, it's a medium-sized still, so a medium body of spirit that allows us to do some really reasonable maturation, but gives a nice mouthfeel at the same time.
I've added a couple of drops there, and it's not good for MacPhail, so it's still got that really nice.
Yeah, nice.
We always say, don't we? Go slowly. You can always add more water. You can't take any out. But I've decided a bit, and that has sort of brought some more of the smoke through on the palate.
Yeah. It's just a little bit of a dry smoke and stuff, as odd as that might seem. So you find that a little bit more on the tongue, a little bit more drying, a little bit more astringent from that smoke.
Malcolm Tucker is saying that he when he added some water, he got some sort of medicinal herbs coming through. So again, different notes. Steve Colin Williams saying, a good gateway smoked whiskey. I'm not sure it's even. Well, I suppose it is. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's there. It's just.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's a little less prevalent in this one than what you'll find with the 10s. And I think you're right. I mean, that gateway element is. I mean, people are either sort of big peat lovers, or they've been put off by trying something else that was heavily peated, and it's a little bit like Marmite, I guess, sort of sometimes with peat. But Benromach has that element where it can appeal to people that do like peated whiskies, but also for people that are kind of on that sort of first foray, into sort of peat and smoke.
It's probably a good one to give to someone who doesn't like smoke at all. Just to say, there's an element of smoke in here. I bet you like this. But probably better idea is what you've done with giving someone a Lefroy 10, maybe. I don't know. The other thing I was going to ask you, so is there anything in the future for the contrasts range or that Benromach have coming out?
We've got some quite interesting things coming out. So we've just you'll find coming out over the next sort of probably month or so into market. We've done an unpeated 10-year-old. So the 10 that we do, that's core, that's all part of the history of creating that sort of pre-1960 style. We've got the whiskey made up in exactly the same way, but without that element of peat and smoke in it. So it'd be quite interesting to see what people think about that. I'm quite excited.
That is pretty unusual for you, right?
Yeah, very much so. And again, it was sort of going back to one of those things. Let's have a little try and a play around and do something sort of different. We did sort of wine cask finishes sort of early in the year. At the end of the year and stuff, I'll probably get shot for saying it, but we've got what we call a high enzyme release, which is going to be quite an interesting little experiment. We've done a few sort of this year. And last year we did an air dried and kiln dried sort of series, looking at the difference between what happens if you just simply air dry the sort of staves before making them into casks, and what happens if you air dry them and force dry them in a kiln for a number of weeks. And it's quite incredible. Both whiskies are absolutely identical apart from that process, but creates two very, very different styles of whiskey. So the slightly more geeky experiments that we'd like to do.
That's pretty cool. I can't think of sort of other people. Do you know of anyone else doing that? Sort of.
Not that sort of specifically, but that's not to say that it's not out there. Some distillers.
Had you previously released a bottle of one of those? Did you say? No,
not of the irons on. We haven't. No, so it's quite an interesting little sort of foray into that, and with the element of the unpeated 10 as well. So
does it have a name, that bottling? Yeah.
Well, as an official name and stuff like that, but it'll probably be, I think, sort of Benromach unpeated. It will just be a I don't know that it's sort of officially official yet, but you can sort of keep your eyes peeled for it. But it'll be
the different drying techniques. They were both virgin oak, I think. They were.
Yeah, that was. I mean, something was done a long time ago, and it's one of those things that won't be sort of repeated. We did a fairly sort of small run on everything, a few thousand bottles, and sort of into market, sort of globally, but. It was quite interesting because it was one of those ones that had to be paired sort of side by side, really, to really kind of appreciate the differences. They were both great whiskies on their own, but it didn't really make sense unless you got to
do the nerdy bit, yeah.
a little bit early, so good.
Yeah, it's nice to have those paired side by side. It'll be an interesting one maybe to buy those bottles. We'll get you on when they're out. Maybe we can have two bottles before and see if we can do a side.
do the double.
Yeah, the double. Okay. All right.
Time as ever is flying by, isn't it, Andy?
Yes. Thank you.
Very much enjoyed that, and thank you so much for joining us, Luke.
No, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for the comments and the feedback. Much appreciated.
Yeah, you're welcome. We'll see you at the end, maybe, unless you have to go. Then
we're all good.
And we won't. But yeah. Cheers. That was a good start, wasn't it?
Good start. It's not a bad start. That was really nice. I really enjoyed that. That was a really nice opening, that one. So now we're moving on. Where are we going, Jake?
We are going to Raasay, and
I asked you for that because I just wanted to double check the pronunciation, so I just hung you up to dry.
That's right, yeah. It's all right. Alasdair can correct me in a minute. But
while saying it myself, but it's one of those that I see it, and my brain is still convinced it's going to be Raasay. So I struggle. My brain is just going ahead of what I should be thinking.
We'll get confirmation. But our two final guests are both founders, which is pretty cool, and Alasdair is also the master distiller. So that's
there you go.
Very exciting. Let's bring him in. Let's bring him in. Yeah.
Let's stop talking about him.
So, the first question, of course, what is the correct pronunciation and of his misery?
Yeah, so Isle of Raasay. If you're from Raasay, it's Raasay. It's kind of like razzle dazzle, I always think. So if that helps at all. The double A, actually, the Ra comes from an Old Norse word that means deer.
Okay.
Say is short for a Gaelic word that means island. So there you go, Deer Island or Raasay.
Deer Island. There you go.
It's not like Jura where the deer outnumber the people, is it?
Oh, it definitely is. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, Raasay is 14 miles long and 3 miles wide, which is about the same size and shape as Manhattan. But the 2011 census, there was 161 people lived on Raasay, so slightly different.
Incredible, yeah.
And there's about 2,000 sheep and God knows how many red deer. But there you go.
Okay, it's outnumbered by the animals. So we're talking to you as you're a founding co-founder of the distillery, but talk to us about how the distillery came about and what inspired you to, build on that.
Yeah, well, I suppose for me, I mean, I can trace my family connection to whiskey back to 1820. A company called J&A Davison, and it was established in 1820 in Coldstream in the Scottish Borders. And my great-grandfather joined that business as an office boy in 1895, and eventually he took over the business in 1923. Unfortunately for me, he retired after the Second World War, and that was the end of the business. So if you then skip forward decades, in 2009, I inherited my great-grandfather's cellar book. It's got all the recipes for the blends that the company produced from 1899 to 1916. So as you do, I decided to try and recreate one of the blends from the book, which is called the Tweed Ale. And I launched that in 2010. So that's how I started in whiskey. And after a few years of doing that, I sat down with my wife and said, there's two things we can do. This was either a very expensive hobby, or I actually should pack my job in and do it as a full-time job. So clearly I did the sensible thing, packed in my full-time job and started blending whiskey for a living. And shortly after that, if you think back to 2012, that was when things got very tight in the industry. A lot of people started to take the age statements off because there just wasn't the quantity to do that. Now, if you've got a business that's based on buying casks of mature whiskey, that's not a great thing. So I then thought, right, well, I'm going to need to raise some investment, and did the sums, if to buy new make, age on, all that kind of, what you'd have to pay in warehouse costs, etc. And it just hit me that I could probably build a small distillery for that amount of money. And so my plan changed into let's build a small distillery, but I still had to raise the investment. And to cut a long story short, that's how I met Bill, Bill Dobby, who's my fellow co-founder of R&B Distillers. And Bill was looking to get into whiskey. He'd even found the perfect place to make whiskey, Isle of Raasay. And so I first met Bill in November 2013. I went up to Raasay with Bill in 2014, stood outside what was a disused, derelict hotel, and turned around, looked at the view and thought, I think Bill's got a point here. This is an amazing place to build a distillery. And so the R&B Distillers was incorporated in July 2014. We started working on the plans for the distillery. 2015, we launched a whiskey called Raasay While We Wait, which clearly wasn't from Raasay, but it was the lightly peated dark fruit style that we intended to make, and it allowed us to talk about Raasay and the style of whiskey we wanted to make. And we got planning permission in February 2016. We broke ground in June 2016. We started distilling in December 2017. and here we are.
Yeah, that is quite a journey, and it's great to hear. But why did you kind of briefly mentioned it was a perfect place to make whiskey?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
why is that?
So I guess for me, when I wrote the business plan for a distillery, I was thinking borders, because that's my family heritage. And when I was chatting to Bill, he said, "Oh no, look, you need to come up to Raasay." So Bill's oldest friend from school, Ian Hector Ross, his wife's Marion's family's from Raasay, so they knew about this disused hotel that was for sale. So Bill went up in February and thought it was fantastic. But I think that whole thing about a windswept, rugged Hebridean island, there was something about it. There'd never been a legal distillery on Raasay before, but there had been distilling on Raasay. So there was a few distillers who didn't bother to get their license and were producing whiskey. So we knew it was there, we knew it was possible. We've got our own well on site. So where the distillery sits, so Raasay's got a really complex geology in a very small island. So it's very same geology as Raasay, but it's predominantly volcanic rock. But where the distillery sits is Jurassic sandstone. So that's incredibly fortunate for us because it's porous and it's like a big sponge, and that's where all the water ends up. But before it gets there, it runs off all of the volcanic rock, collecting all of those minerals, and then ends up 60 meters below the distillery, and then we bring that up. And we use that water from the well for everything. We use it for mashing, fermentation, we use it for cooling. Most importantly, we use it for cask reduction, and we use it for bottling as well. So we do everything on Raasay. Everything's matured on the island. Everything's bottled on the island.
Yeah, so provenance is quite important, and there's different production.
Yeah, it's of Raasay. We've got 6 bedrooms in the distillery, a restaurant, bar. You can come and stay with us, have a dram, admire the view, and just soak it all in.
That's great. And talk to us a little bit about the 6 cask maturation, what that means.
Yeah, so again, I was very fortunate. I mean, essentially I was handed a blank sheet of paper and asked to design this distillery. So the first question was, well, what is it? What liquid are we going to make? Mm-hmm. And it alluded to it earlier, lightly peated, because we're Hebridean island. We're not Islay, but we're Hebridean, so that kind of lends itself to a lightly peated whiskey. But then something, we wanted something that's maybe slightly different from most whiskies. So if you think about fruit and whiskey, we're generally talking about apples, pears, bananas, maybe some tropical fruit. But there wasn't really a lot of whiskey with this kind of dark fruit, kind of blackcurrant, those sorts of elements. So that was a big part of it. And it was really, there's a lot of chat about Bowmore in the 70s having this kind of like dark fruit character, and then they changed a few things and it went away. So that fascinated me. But if you imagine like having a blank sheet of paper, you have to think about the liquid that you want to make first, and then you have to design a process that makes that liquid. So I was very fortunate to be able to do that. And also in designing that, we knew that we were going to release whiskey at 3, 4, 5 years old. So how would you produce a good and excellent whiskey at that age? And for me, coming from a blending background, you need complexity, depth, and balance. Mm-hmm. So how we were going to do that? So one of the big parts of that to complete to get the complexity is to have. So we do 6 months of peated, 6 months of unpeated, mature it separately. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't come back together until it's mature. There are a number of different things that can be off or on in the distillery. So the cooling jackets on the wash backs can be off or on. We've got a cooling jacket in the liner of the wash still that can be off or on. We've got a little purifier, 6 copper plate purifier just off to the side of the spirit still with a valve that can be off or on. So those different things means that we can produce 6 different types of new make, depending on the combinations of off and on. And then you've got peated and unpeated, so you can see the combinations. And then we use distiller's yeast, and we use a champagne yeast, and then you got 3-day fermentations and 5-day fermentations. So there's lots of different things going on. But that didn't answer your question because you asked me about the 6 cask bills. So basically, so again, it's back to this: how do you get complexity, depth, and balance? So all of those different types of new mixed spirit are matured separately, but in 3 different cask types. So you've got ex-rye casks. So quercus alba that previously had American rye whiskey in them. Then we use Chinkapin oak. So Chinkapin oak's also North American white oak, but it's a different oak species. It's Quercus muhlenbergi, and it gives less of that vanilla and butterscotch, but more of the kind of dark fruit richness that we're looking for. And then we use ex-Bordeaux wine casks. They all come from the left bank, so it's all predominantly Cabernet Sauvignon grape. This is a higher tannin wine. Most of them are from the Margaux region, so the likes of Chateau Parma, Chateau Margaux itself. And the interesting thing about that is the French oak casks are made up of Quercus patria and Quercus roba. So you've got essentially 4 different oak species and 3 different cask types with peated and unpeated. So that's where the 6 casks comes from. And we knew we wanted to release young whiskey, but we had to design something that we create complexity and depth. And of course, the last most important bit is after maturation, when we bring all of that together, is to marry it together to get the balance.
To get the what? Sorry.
The balance. So you can have complexity and depth, but if you can't balance all of those elements,
there's no point. Yeah, absolutely.
I've double checked, Andy, and we did have the Raasay single malt in September 2022 in pour and sip.
Okay.
This one, of course, is something different again, isn't it?
This is different again. So this is the point where I should confess that I did a degree in botany at Glasgow University. So things like oak species, barley variety, yeast types fascinate me, and to see the difference that different oak species can have on maturing whiskey, what an opportunity. So if you think about it, there's something like 600 different oak species in the world. Probably about 250 have been used at some point in history for maturing alcohol. I have to say possibly not all of them are great for that, but anyway. And then if you come specifically to the Scotch whisky industry, we tend to use 3 different oak species. We use Quercus alba, Quercus patria, and Quercus roba, and that's it out of a pool of 600. So,
when you think about it, when you just look at the numbers like that, it's absolutely
when you say it like that. But ultimately, we all want to make good whiskey, so it has to work, and it has to. I think the most important thing is it has to work with your distillery character, with your spirit. And not all are going to. So that brings us on to. I
was about to say that brings us really onto Columbian oak.
Yeah, so Columbian oak. So Quercus humboldtii. Again, fascinating for me. It only grows in Panama and Colombia, and it only grows in the Andean mountains, and like over 3,000 feet up in the mountains. It's also amazing because we think of oak trees as being deciduous, so this time of year they're dropping their leaves, but not Quercus humboldtii. It's evergreen, an evergreen oak tree. And on our bottle, we can see you've just got a little. It's a very different shaped leaf as well. It doesn't have the kind of serrated leaf. It's kind of long and thin. Actually, the one in the box is probably better because there's a bit of contrast in the colour.
Oh, okay, I can see it from there.
Yeah. So anyway, more importantly, what does all that do to the whiskey? So that was the that was the thing. I remember when we first filled these casks, and Scott Fraser, one of our sales guy, and I were going around the warehouse, and we were tasting a few casks, and I opened this Quercus humboldtii, and his jaw dropped, and he's like, "What is that? That's amazing." And he's like, "I didn't think we had anything that old." And I said, "What, 3 months?" It's like, it just takes off. It's incredible. So I guess for me, what does Quercus? So just quickly before we get on to that this is the same as we would normally do. So it's our unpeated spirit and our peated spirit matured separately in these Quercus humboldtii casks. So that's important, as that's how we get lightly peated. So same peat that we just heard about Highland peat, so aromatic, fragrant smoke. It comes in about 52 parts per million, but by the time we've married our unpeated and peated together, we're about between 6 and 11 in the bottle.
Okay.
Which, when you nose it, I think it comes. It's kind of right in there, but it's also in there with that creme brulee, with that kind of caramelized.
So we say to the final product we get about 6 parts per million
In the bottle. Bottled, it's about 6. Yeah.
Which is less than what Luke was saying, right?
Yeah. I mean, we can be up to 11, but I guess peat's a fascinating thing because it's the way the phenols react with the cask. And again, going back to the cask, so the casks are made to our specification. So we specify that all of the timber, all of the oak is air dried for 24 months, a minimum of 24 months before the casks are made. When the casks are made, they have a high toast and then a high char. So the air drying and the high toasting is really important for us, because if you take oak, the dry matter of oak would be about 52% lignin. So lignan's what makes plant cells and what makes plants strong and all the rest of it. But when lignin breaks down, it turns into volatile phenols. So by a longer air drying and a higher toasting, phenols generally, once you've made them in the whiskey, they start to degrade, but eventually you can get them back from the wood. So that's why we do the kind of longer air drying and the higher toasting. Anyway, I'm digressing. Let's get back to whiskey.
No,
it's really interesting though. That's great.
It's really interesting. A lot of people saying it's
I'm bringing in a few notes that people are putting in. There are a couple of absolute crackers which I might come back to actually. But Mike Pizarro is getting sort of a botanical edge that's distinctive, but you can't quite place it, which I think is definitely sort of my first sort of opinion as well. I'm just trying to pin it down. Dave Walcott's got some heather honey. We've got some fresh leather from Malcolm Tucker. Paul Cruz is getting leather and smoke. We've got Clive Hampton's got some toasted caramel, bitter orange. We've got some caramel biscuits, some sweet dark chocolate. But yeah, I've got to come back to a couple of these ones, the early ones, really funny. So Real Boinger's trying to figure it out. He says, well, I get smoky wurst sausage being barbecued, accompanied by sauerkraut with apples on the nose.
I love that. I'm going to use that one like that.
And Steve Coleman Williams, he's got it nailed down to the time he was at the Hyde Park Winter Wonderland, and he could smell the hot dog hut with the meat and onions as well as the churro hut at the same time.
There you go. That's
how specific can you get?
Absolutely perfect, I think. And that's what I love about this. It's got that sweet element to it, but it's also got, in fact, for me, that botanical element is a kind of cross between mint and green tea. It's that kind of herbaceous thing that's going on.
Yeah, it's really just it's just so complex, and it's just I want to sit with it for a while. It's just I love the savoury element of it.
Yeah,
for me, but it's so balanced with that wonderful kind of creme brulee note that you were talking about.
Yeah. And I think that if it was all creme brulee, it'd be too much, wouldn't it? Let's face it. And also in the palate, when we get to that the creme brulee, the creme element, the mouth coating that you get from that is just fantastic.
Okay, so this is bottled at 50.7%.
50.7, yeah. And again, we looked at a number of different bottling strengths that would work, and I didn't want to over reduce it. So we were kind of thinking 52-ish, but then this 50.7 just seemed to bring everything together.
Yeah, absolutely. There's like a really nice minty finish as well, with like a kind of burnt coffee kind of note as well, which is really nice on the finish. It's just really, really impressive, I have to say. It's wonderful. There's loads of notes coming through now as well. This is just one of those I think that's going to get people's
it is, yeah.
And get them.
Mike Pizarro is pointing out how radically different it is to the last one. He's getting forest fruits up front, and then some citrus oils, and then smoke. It's almost like 3 drinks in one, he's saying. It's doing wonders for Malcolm Tucker's cold, so that's good. Glad to be of service. Stephen David Walcock are saying about the oiliness of it. Dave's also getting some espresso martini. That's a pretty cool note. There's smooth brandy cream from Peter Burrett. Paul Cruz is getting some more floral notes with a bit of water. I think people are starting to add a bit of water. Then
that's the other thing about it being slightly higher strength, is you can bring it down. And I think that, for me, this is something you just keep going back to, because it's almost like every time you go for another sip, you get another.
That's what I'm saying. Every time I go put my nose back in it, I'm getting something else that I wasn't getting.
Absolutely. At one point, all I could get was creme brulee, and now I can't get it at all. It's
it's
great.
It's fascinating. The longer it's sat in the glass, for me, the heathery smoke note gets stronger.
That's the sort of floral that Paul Cruz was getting.
Yeah, for me, it's funny. It's really, really cool. I have to say. And then Clive Hampton saying, I've just got a touch of smoke on the finish. Gorgeous. And Peter Gilmore, the guys have great imagination and wording to describe the whiskey every month. It's very creative. I've got to be honest, I loved, because you can talk about just notes and go, it's creme brulee and this and that and that and that. But time and place, those are always the best tasting notes that I think of when you go, oh, it reminds me of that thing where I was at that place and that one moment in time.
But that's kind of how they're imprinted in your brain, right? They do take you back to like the.
I do love that analogy of like hot dogs and onions here and Cheetos over here. I think
Winter Wonderland needs to do their placement of their stands better, to be honest with you, next year to have
I don't know, just stand in the middle and a glass of this.
Why have that and that when you can just have this? It's amazing. I mean, it's a really amazing jam. Are there any plans in the future to do some more kind of experiments with?
So we released this as the wee label on the box that kind of gives it away at the top here. But we released this as kind of the first in our oak species maturation series. So there's a few other things in the warehouse, and it's really, again, just to, do you know what? It's one of these things that we all go, it's a bourbon cask or it's a sherry cask and all the rest of it, and it's like, well, yes, but is it, and then it's okay, it's North American oak or it's French oak. Yes, but, is it Quercus alba or is it Quercus muhlenberg? Is it Quercus patria or Quercus oak? So it's kind of looking at that and then just taking an oak species and saying, how does this work with the Isle of Raasay spirit and what does it get? And, these things can be polarizing, because, like, for instance, we've got some fresh patria casks and fresh roba casks, and the patria from France and some from Hungary, and I think that it's all of those elements. We've also got some ex-Oloroso sherry casks that the Bodega did a very similar thing. So they've got Dutch oak, they've got German oak, Russian oak, Spanish oak, Portuguese oak, and where the tree grows also has it's not just the species, it's the geography, because if you think about it, the warmer it is, the faster the tree grows, the more open the grain is. The Russian oak's giving absolutely nothing to the spirit because it's so tight and growing so slowly because it's so cold. And it's all of these things that essentially it's just an oak cask, but it's not. There's so much more to it, and for me it's trying to go, how does this influence our spirit? What works and what works best, and then how do you bring all that together and balance it?
That's what's great to hear, because it's not about, like, it's not just for you like an experimentation of like, let's try something new and different and be creative. It's like, no, how can we make our new mix spirit? What is going to work with our specification?
That was the whole thing with the Nicaea, the 6 cask recipe is, the Chinkapin oak, the fresh Chinkapin oak, Quercus muhlenberg is in there. It's in there for a reason, because it's adding body and structure. In crude terms, if you were blending a whiskey, you would have your kind of base that you build it off, and then your middle, and then your top dressings. And the Chinkapin is that middle. It's what's pulling it together and giving it the kind of richness.
Yeah, great. Well, that was an absolutely fascinating talk about all things wood. I have to say, I've learned a lot from listening to you there. I thought I knew about wood, but I didn't.
Well, actually, if I can squeeze in just a really quick question and just to get a quick update. there was a question I was just saving. Malcolm Tucker asked towards the beginning, given that it's R&B, was asking about your sort of second and possibly third side, sort of the borders side of the.
Yeah. So to be perfectly honest, our second distillery, so we've got Jury Farm down in Maclean. We've got planning down there. So Maclean is just outside Campbelltown. This is we've just harvested our third lot of regeneratively grown barley there. That's currently being distilled on Raasay. But obviously the idea is that we will be growing barley on the farm where Maclean distillery is, and maybe after we've done that, the B bit of R&B might come to fruition. But I've got very different ideas about what that might be, but that's for another time. So.
Wow,
that's great.
All right,
exciting plans.
Right.
Well, thank you so much, Alasdair. That's echo what Andy was saying. This has been great fun. Very educational.
Nice.
And if you're able to stick about, then we'll see you shortly. If not, thank you very, very much.
Cheers.
See you in a bit.
Well,
that was fab, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, those are the two great drams, I have to say, so far.
Yeah, and
different, isn't it? Radically.
Exactly, yeah. I think it was Mike was saying how different they were. There was somebody, I think it was Jeffster, who sort of was saying that he wasn't getting the wood shavings from the first one that some people were talking about, but he did get it from the second one. Obviously, these are all fresh oak, so there's sort of a common thread, but completely different type of oak. So actually, very different there as well.
And how peat parts per million on the bottling just is, because that was way smokier for me, like instantly, like it really, and then the Benromach was much more subtle, but peat parts per million were more.
I think it depends when you measure the ppm as well, but let's not get too far down that rabbit hole. What we're going to do now is go to an unpeated whiskey, which isn't what you'd usually do in a tasting. You sort of build up to the peat normally, but this is it's at 54.3%, and I've had a taste of it. I think it's going to stand up just fine. Obviously, the other two were lightly peated, so I'm excited for this one as well. So let's bring in
40%.
Bring in Fabrizio.
Yeah, exactly.
Here he is. I can see he's ready.
He's ready.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going very well, and I think it's going to keep going well. Yeah.
I hope so. Anyway,
I'm sure it is. I'm very excited about this one. I don't want to steal your entire intro, but Fabrizio, I sort of alluded to the fact that you're the second founder on tonight, and you're the founder of a new independent bottler. So tell us all about that.
Yeah, exactly that. Thanks for the intro. As I said, my name's Fabrizio. Fab's a lot easier, especially after a few whiskies. And just over a year ago, 13 months ago, and I will always remember the date because we launched the Heart Cut 3 days before our twin girls were born. And so it was a very busy week for my wife and I when we co-founded the Heart Cut. But we launched it over a year ago, and so far, so good. And I guess I'll tell you exactly what the Heart Cut is in a moment, but to really explain what it is, it's kind of a little bit easier to explain kind of my background and also that of my wife.
Absolutely. It's a dynamic duo, and Georgie obviously is well known in the whiskey parts.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm sure a few people might be gutted that she's not on the call today. I'm a pretty good stand-in at times, but no. Both Georgie and I, we started out in the booze industry at the age of 18, both working in bars. And then we took slightly different routes, whereas Georgie became this wonderful whiskey expert and worked for, as you've seen on the tasting cards, Bacardi, Diageo. She actually started her first whiskey role essentially for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society as their global brand ambassador, I think at about 23 years old. So she was drinking cask strength whiskey from pretty much the start of her career. I took a slightly different route and worked in drinks marketing agencies. So being a bartender, left the bar world and moved into the world of drinks agencies, where fortunately I did meet Georgie on an event at the Monaco Grand Prix, actually, where we was doing a Johnny Walker Blue event, which was quite nice. Yeah, as you do. But what I was able to kind of take from my side, and I kind of explain what Georgie's brought in, but I was able to work with lots of different drinks brands. And so kind of working with the Johnny Walkers and Diageo being a big client of ours and working across their single malt portfolio, but also having this opportunity to work across different spirit categories, working with bartenders, working with the off-trade, the on-trade, and more importantly, working with people like you on the call. I can't see anyone's faces, but I assume there are lots of people going, yeah, people like us, right? But it was really important because what that's kind of allowed me to do as I've kind of grown, I've never been too far away from any part of this drinks industry, whether that be the person drinking it or the person making it. And so kind of having this well-rounded experience and kind of, well, what does a drink brand look like? Georgie and I, once upon a time, wanted to open up our own distillery. That was the idea, and may well still be an idea. And we actually wrote a business plan probably about 5 or 6 years ago. And looking back on it now, it was more of a Pinterest kind of mood board as opposed to any kind of formidable business plan. But we did share it with a few people, and a few people did say, well, why don't you do something before you start a distillery? You know, they're quite expensive. There's a lot to go into it. So why don't you learn the ropes of business first? And I remember coming home one day and Georgie was, I've got it. Like, it's going to be what was eventually the Heart Cut. And so the Heart Cut is an independent bottler that spotlights distilleries from around the world. Now, what this is born out of is through my career and through Georgie's career, we've traveled quite considerably. And in that, we're foodies by heart. You know, every time we go to a new country, the first thing we want to do is find what's the best bar, what's the best restaurant. And most of the time we go to distilleries. My daughter's 13 months old have been to 3 distilleries already. And I'm sure they're only going to continue going to more. But it was always this passion of wanting to find something and ultimately share it with people. I'm sure a lot of you will have friends, or you might be that person that recommends destinations. You know, if a friend's going to New York, you go, well, go to this bar and go to this place. And we were that. And what we wanted to do was transition that kind of love and passion for this food and drinks industry and put it into the whiskey world, because we are spotlighting distilleries that some people might not have heard of. And some of the best things is when I talk to people and go, well, we've got something from a distillery in Denmark. And they're like, where? Not Scotland, not America, not Japan. And so it's what we want to do is introduce distilleries that we know and love with people like yourselves, you know, the whiskey explorer, the whiskey curious, you know, the really great distilleries, you know what you drink, you know what you like, but if you drink a rye, maybe you might try a rye from Finland. And so what we wanted to do was, through our single casks and our small batches, is introduce people to distilleries that we know and love. And we will jump into a little bit more into the Cotswolds, but just to really kind of demonstrate what we do as a brand, for anyone who's seen or hasn't seen our label before, it's cut in half. And when we turn around and say that we have 2 customers, the person we sell to, but also the distillery that we represent, you know, Rob, the global brand ambassador for the Cotswolds, recently said that we're the best brand ambassador he could possibly have, because all we do is tell people how great the Cotswolds is. And we've got stuff from M&H Distillery or Stowning Distillery. And so we are going up and down the country, going to whiskey clubs, doing stuff like this, doing barrel top tastings, and just introducing people to brands that we know and love, but we really want to push that brand. You know, I want you to walk out of this wonderful tasting going, Cotswolds, didn't really know about them before. That's actually fantastic. I'm going to go and try their Founders Reserve or whatever the case may be. And that's kind of our ultimate goal as an independent bottler. Obviously, we want to sell some bottles. Fortunately, that is working to a certain degree. But more importantly, we want to introduce you to something that you might not have heard of before, might not have known too much about before, and therefore kind of can take away something that you kind of go, oh, there are 54 distilleries, whiskey distilleries in England. Didn't know that. There was 49 when we first launched Cotswolds, and that was in February of this year. So that just goes
mind-boggling, isn't it?
How quickly.
I remember when there was 1. Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's really exciting to see, and kind of just to really be a part of these distilleries and their kind of growth. I don't know if there are any questions, or I can kind of keep going as much as.
Yeah, I think the the first, I mean, how many released you up to now? 9, I think. Is it? It's just wicked. Like it's like a list of like the coolest distilleries around, and like some of my favorite distilleries. And like you say, you've got sections on your website where you're just bigging up your partner distilleries. Like it's not, it's almost like separate to the bottles. And I love so much about what you're doing.
Yeah. Okay. So I can jump into, or I can talk about why we work with certain distilleries and kind of like how that really comes across. And I guess at the very beginning, when we first had an idea, we didn't have a bottle, we didn't have a brand name, we just had this wonderful idea, and we went to 14 different distilleries, kind of just like holding our cards and being like, this is what we want to do. And all 14 people turned around and said, yes, we're happy to sell you a cask. And this was after quite a lot of friends in the industry telling that distilleries don't sell direct, they won't sell to you, it won't be that you have to go through a cask broker. We've got nothing against cask brokers. Maybe off the call I do, but right now I don't. We don't go directly with cask brokers, and that's purely because we want to tell the story of that distillery. We've got a really exciting release coming out from an English distillery in Derbyshire area just before Christmas. I can't tell the name, but I'm sure you can figure out exactly what it is. But we spoke to them at the Whiskey Show, we go up there, we talk to them, we really get behind what their distillery is, why are they doing, why have they become this phenomenon all of a sudden over the kind of the past year. And so they're doing some really great stuff, and we start to love these distilleries. And a lot of where they come from, people recommend, like go onto our Instagram, we usually just ask, what's your favorite rye at the moment, or who should we be talking to? And a lot of people are telling us distilleries that we'd never heard of. There's one on the west coast of Denmark, not Stauning, it's actually a lot further north than Stauning, called Thy, THY, and they are an old farming family, and then kind of the younger generation were living in Copenhagen. They moved back up about 4 or 5 years ago, and they really started to like build back into the brand and develop this fantastic whiskey. And so we're able to meet these wonderful people who are doing great stuff. And it goes to that whole craft nature, and you'd be quite familiar with like craft beer and kind of that rise. But craft distilleries, especially in the last 10 to 20 years, have kind of taken that on, and they've all got these wonderful, fantastic stories. Kiru, which was our third release from Finland, was 9 guys sitting in a sauna. I think there are 2.9 million saunas in Finland, and there's only 5 million people or something to that effect. It's like the biggest sauna population. So 9 friends sitting in a sauna drinking American rye going, well, we have lots of rye in Finland, why aren't we drinking Finnish rye? And then lo and behold, they've created a distillery.
We've had them on a couple of times, and actually their rye is one of my favorites I've ever tried.
Yeah, they're really fun. They're doing some great stuff. They malt their rye, so it kind of gives off these like cereal notes, these really fun honey notes, which just allows them to play a little bit. And I'll jump into New World distilleries and what that means. And I know there's been a lot of back and forth of kind of like what is the old world and new world. But when we talk about what a New World distillery is, not only is it geography, so outside of the big 5 being Canada, America, Japan, Ireland, and Scotland, but more in terms of mindset, because there are distilleries in Scotland and there are distilleries in America that are doing things slightly differently. They are a little bit younger. They've only been created recently, some that we've been talking about so far. And it just gives them this kind of breath of fresh air and a new lease of life to kind of go, well, how do we want to do it? And kind of how can we tell our story? And they often don't have the luxury of time of leaving whiskey in a cask for 20, 30 years. And so you have to really think from the beginning, what do you want it to taste like? What do we want this initial flavor? And so that starts to play into, well, I can kind of use Cotswolds as a really great example. They have longer fermentation times, 96 hours, and what they want to kind of end up with is this wonderful fruity eau de vie style whiskey. Dr. Jim Swan, who some of you may know, some of you may not, he's extremely famous and has had an integral part in quite a lot of distilleries all over the world. bottles.
James Warren and his SGR cask has come up quite a few times over the months and years, and I'm pouring syrup. Yeah.
Cotswolds is one of those distilleries, and I've got our M&H release as well, and that's another one of those distilleries. But it was kind of when they were creating it. Don't create a whiskey that needs the wood to make it better. Create a whiskey that is only going to be amplified by the wood, and using the STR cask and really playing with it. So it's that thought, and it's not just the Cotswolds. It's a lot of distilleries. Like, what are we putting inside that barrel at the very beginning? You know, you want the barrel to give it these wonderful little touches, as opposed to really taking over and creating this different style of whiskey. Wonderful. So I've spoken a lot about the Heart Cut, and I've slightly dipped into what the Cotswolds is. So what I can do, and I'm sure people have already started to have a sip, and I'd be very disappointed if you hadn't. I will say, because I do often forget, that it is 54%. I will just reiterate what has already been said. I get so used to drinking cask samples that 54% does taste like 40% to me, what it used to feel like a little bit ago. But what I will say on this is it did come out of the cask at 62%.
Okay.
As a brand, we only have one cask that is at cask strength, and that was our East London Liquor Company, and that's because it actually came out at 49.9%. So extremely low in itself anyway, and it tasted great. What we believe and what we want to try and do, and it really plays into the audience that we're going after, as it were, is that we don't want to scare anyone away. If you can kind of remember the first time anyone ever tried a smoky whiskey, if you were given Lefroy at the age of 18, there's nothing wrong with Lefroy, but at a time and a place you go, oh, that's a little bit too much for me. And so if you have a whiskey that's 60%, it might put you off unintentionally. And so what we tried to do is bring it down to an ABV that we feel is good as it is, or it can still take some water. So that usually involves me playing around with lots of fun gadgets, trying it at different ABVs. We have what I like to call a tasting panel. Being working in the whiskey industry for a very long time, we've got a lot of friends with some really great palates, and so we'll usually just bring them all around a table and just fire away and kind of, does it work better at 60, at 58, at 55, whatever the case may be. And we just felt that this one in particular worked extremely well. 54.3 it came out of, and I'm sure there might be some tasting notes coming in already, and I feel bad leading with any tasting notes.
Yeah, come with it, Andy. I know what I'm getting. What are the members
what are the audience getting? Audience. It makes it sound so like we're doing a show here. Mike Pizarro saying it smells distinctly like buttered popcorn. Pexton saying it's very floral. Malcolm Tucker saying tropical fruit, mango, peaches, vanilla, and milk chocolate. Steve Coleman Williams is saying that after a long thinking discussion, I've settled on fresh vanilla and lychee, sharp and sweet on the nose. I like the idea of yourself doing that whole discussion with yourself and going, no, after a long think, no, it's definitely vanilla and lychee. Crikey, that made my brain hurt, says Steve Coleman Williams. A real boinga. I get peaches, apricots, cherries, and berries on the nose. I'm walking through an orchard. Chris Turner, very tropical. Peter Gilmore, I'm not getting much on the nose, but the palate, I'm getting apricot with citrus and a herby finish. Jeff from Malcolm Tucker talking about the white works. Ali C, I'm getting really strong notes of peaches canned in syrup. Clive Hampton, such a seaweed and treacle. Complex on the nose. Jeffster, digestive biscuits and butter on the nose for me on this one. A lot of people saying peaches and ripe apricots seems to be.
Well, I'll just quickly say if you're struggling to get sort of stuff on the nose, we are going up to quite a high ABV now. Like you might want to try and give your nose a little break. Try and smell the back of your hand can sometimes just refresh your senses, and just go in, carefully and not too quickly.
I like what Mike Pizarro says. It's very drinkable. Reminds me of a boozy pineapple upside down cake.
Yeah, what I was getting was those, like cola cubes, but the pineapple ones.
Yeah, I love those.
Just like bang to start with, and now it's sort of opening up into other things. Right.
Just saying it's more oily after adding H2O. And surprisingly, a subtle finish, fruity but not long. Steve Conway's first impression. Yes. There you go. you put that on the back of the bottle?
I've been scribbling furiously. It's normally what happens when stuff like this. I'm like, tell me more, exactly what. But no, like a lot of those tasting notes, they make exactly a lot of sense. Like I originally said, their initial distillate, they go for that fruity eau de vie. But as we've pointed out, that this is in a New American oak cask, kind of what we've seen with the two previously as well. But what would normally kind of have these spicier vanilla notes, this all of a sudden takes what is fruity and it transforms it into something tropical. Why? How? Like, that is the magic of whiskey. I can't, unfortunately, I can't explain all of that, but it's the beauty of our job, because when we choose casks, so choosing distilleries comes down to recommendations, people putting us in touch with different distilleries, and just really understanding how can we tell your story. And we've got some really exciting ones coming up over the next year. But when it comes to choosing a cask, that's where it gets, I guess, even more exciting. It's like I often say, it's like being a kid in a candy store, because you walk into a warehouse or they'll send you a box full of really tasty whiskey, and you just get to play around and really just understand, because the magic of a single cask, and how I explain to all my non-whiskey friends, if you've got original bottlers, so people who will have thousands and thousands of casks, or hundreds of casks, or tens of casks, whatever the case may be, and they blend them together to get something consistent. But not every cask is exactly the same. I've got twin girls, one's brown hair, brown eyes, one's blonde hair, blue eyes. They were in the same tummy at the same time. So it's like a really good analogy of going two casks side by side, going into the same barrel at the same time, can taste completely different. Most of the time, distillers, blenders will create consistency and bottle that, but every now and again, it throws up these really cool, I'll call them anomalies in the best way, because you get these fantastic flavor bombs that really come through. And this is a perfect example of going, it can tie back to what they do as a distillery. You can pick up on these tropical notes, but it's almost amplified in a certain direction that we can have some fun with, because when we choose a cask, we want to tell the story of that distillery. We want to be able to kind of, it's not going to be too far-fetched that it won't make sense to a customer who wants to go back to Cotswolds afterwards, but we can latch on to a certain part and go, these tropical notes, they come from the barrel process, and this is their fermentation, and this is what they are doing. Some other really fun examples, the M&H distillery based in Tel Aviv, our whiskey spent its entire life in a pomegranate wine cask. Now people are like, pomegranates is like really big in Israel, really big in the Middle East, it's part of the culture. And so just us being able to tell the story of a particular region. It also spent 1.5 years by the Dead Sea, which is the lowest place on earth, spends a lot of the time at 50 degrees or higher. The whiskey went into the cask at 67% and came out at 69%, because it is so humid that the way the evaporation in the cask was breathing is that alcohol was staying inside. And I did have to ask Toma, the head distiller, quite a few times, like, are you sure? Like, I know you know more about it than I do, but are you really sure? And so we just get these really lovely opportunities to get excited, you know. And so if something excites us, then it's a really easy, I don't want to use the word sell, but it's more of just introduce to other people and go, this is why we love it. This is why we think you would love it. And the beauty of having an independent bottler is that we get to choose different styles. So if you like smoky, you can go towards our heather smoked one from Stauning, which is the west coast of Denmark. They use heather instead of peat because they have an abundance of heather in their local area. They literally have a barbecue out the back of their ginormous distillery where they put the heather on once a year to smoke all of the barley to kind of give it that really subtle, wispier flavor. And so you can really start to play into different story points and give people who are curious about whiskey. We like to, the way I break it down is you've got the whiskey enthusiasts. Some people refer to them as the whiskey geeks. Georgie loves being called a whiskey geek. Or you've got the whiskey curious. The people who are like, I know a couple of distilleries. I like to get whiskey for Christmas, but I don't know where to go next because whiskey is bloody bamboozling. And every time I walk into a spirit shop or whatever the case may be, you kind of go, oh, this is great. What do I do next? And I know something about whiskey. So for the person who's just starting out, it can be pretty overwhelming. And so we're just trying to, through some different label designs, through a different way of talking about brands through kind of colour and a bit of fun. Whilst Georgie might be the whiskey expert, a drinks expert, yes, can run a business, kinda. But the way I like to see it is that because I'm not a super whiskey expert, I get to see it from a different angle, and so when I get to talk about it, I can talk about it in a slightly different way that might align better with people when they are looking for different styles of whiskey.
Yeah,
that's it. And pouring sippers, of course, love to try lots of different styles of whiskey. I'm just having a quick look through your range now because I think there's some of these distilleries we've had, and it's a few spirits I don't think there's been mentioned yet, which I'm a big fan of, which I think we had a while back. And I see your two latest ones are from St. George, so I'm pretty certain we've never had. And that's to have two St. George releases is very, very cool.
Yeah, so St. George, for those of you who don't know, I'm sure a lot of people, it's not the St. George distillery in the UK.
Yeah.
It is the one in San Francisco. So St. George Spirits started in 1982. It started off making eau de vies. So I originally spoke about eau de vies when I was talking about Cotswolds and the style of distillate that they go for, fruit eau de vies. So St. George Spirits, they're not a whiskey company by nature. They do have whiskies. They've got Baller whiskey and they've got other single malts. They've just released a new one, which is great. But they have different styles. They've got a really great gin, a really great vodka, and they used to have this most amazing cherry liqueur, think Chambord, but just fantastic. Really made a good Key Royale for my mum at Christmas. But we spoke to them again. We had some connections, and they sent us over a whole load of casks, samples, and we tried them, and none of them made sense. They're not actually technically called, our two releases are not called whiskey. They can't legally be called whiskey in the UK or Europe. We call them experimental malts, and that's because they were made from distilled beer. So there's more ingredients in it than should technically be. Yeah. Wow. So it's our number 8, and they're really fun because they can be quite decisive, but we got sent over a load of samples. We couldn't make up our mind, so we bought 2. The first time we did that. But they just, and we liked them so much, we didn't know if we were going to be able to sell them because they were so far-fetched, and the flavor profiles just, we are all about picking casks that are slightly different and kind of have a nice talking point, and even that was a little bit too far-fetched for us. But they've been received really well, and people tend to kind of choose either the number 8, which Ali Reynolds of Stowning turned around and said it was like a cup of tea just supercharged. So it's got these really kind of like relaxed flavors, whereas number 9, it's like biting into a jalapeno, but it was distilled from a stout, a coffee stout. So it's got these chocolatey notes, but then it's got these spicy wisps of, like, if you imagine biting into a green pepper, and these jalapeno notes, but then it kind of softens out with a coffee stout, which, saying out loud, sounds absolutely ridiculous and no one would ever want to try it. But if you do get a chance, I don't know where people are based around the country, but they are all available at Dram Bar in London. So if you don't want to shell out for an entire bottle, which I highly encourage, but I would say that, we are stocked in Dram Bar, Soho Whiskey Club, Milroy's to come soon. So for those of you who are whiskey aficionados, you can find some of our other products there. But yeah, we've got we're doing our first small batch coming out later this year. So for those of you who might not know, single cask is exactly what it is. It's one cask and we bottle the entirety of it, whereas a small batch is where we blend together a couple of casks, however it may be. And we're doing it with JJ Corey. So they are, yes, they are an Irish whiskey broker, which is a blender just over in Ireland, and they make some really fantastic stuff. They've blended it for us. It tastes exceptional. I'm really excited, and that will come out alongside, and I think you might have mentioned earlier, someone said in the comments, Wireworks, being that English distillery from Derbyshire. Yeah, so we've got a Horny Port cask coming from them, so it's some really exciting stuff. And then yeah, next year we're going to be releasing one a month for the foreseeable future, so some really exciting whiskies.
What number are you going up to?
Pardon?
What number are you going up to?
don't know. That is a question. I've currently got in our projected pipeline that we're going to get quite high. I've allowed number-wise, the way I kind of record all of our cars, we can go up to 999. I don't know if we'll get quite there, but yeah, we're going to be doing quite a few in the UK. We're going to be doing some small batches. We're talking to some really exciting people, not necessarily distilleries, but other independent bottlers, about doing collabs and what that kind of looks like. So really, we're all about rising tide rises all ships. It's been my mantra ever since I've been younger, and so we're really having a lot of fun of working with other like-minded either distilleries, independent bottlers, blenders like Woven, who are based up in Edinburgh. They're doing some really fantastic stuff. We're good friends with the team there, Compass Box and the like. So it's just like, how can we continue to do some really cool stuff that excites you? You know, ultimately it's not just us having fun. It has to make sense for the person buying the whiskey and drinking the whiskey. And so we just want to show you the possibilities of what's out there. It's not just limited to certain whiskey producing countries. Not that there is anything wrong with them, because they are fantastic.
I guess I'm starting to get slightly conscious of time again. Right? Yeah, it's great. You know, when we're having fun, having a good chat, it does fly by. But I guess like maybe one of the final questions would be, you know, would you ever bottle a Scotch, or is that deliberately no Scotch yet? Or
no, I said earlier, we're not against certain countries. It's all just about people and mindset. We have got one distillery who we've been talking to for a little while. We've been waiting for that right moment to present itself. They sent me a cask sample. I got an email 2 weeks ago saying, I've got a fantastic cask, do you want to try it? Sent it through. I was like, okay, here we go. I tried it. It tastes fantastic. We're bottling it. It's going to come out next year. So there will be one from Scotland coming out pretty soon. So yeah, we got nothing against Scotch whiskey. It's just trying to find the distilleries. Like there are a lot of independent bottlers.
I think it almost works out like more fun that you kind of haven't gone there in the first, first few releases. But yeah, I'm sure I had no doubt you'd work your way around eventually.
Yeah, there is too much on offer, but we've had a really good opportunity, and some other distilleries are also going to be in the pipeline for.
Are there more comments, Andy? You wanted to?
No, Steve Coleman Williams is the last one saying that Milroy's and Drambar is superb. That was the last one we had. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I love this dram. I think whoever said lychee, that was bang on, actually. Yeah,
I like lychee. That's a great one.
And sort of like tinned peaches and nectarines, and it's just syrupy, yummy, yum, 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 yum. So thank you very much, Fab. And yeah, if you're able to hang around, then maybe we'll see you in a minute.
Yeah, sounds good.
Nice.
Lovely stuff.
3 very different whiskey, despite the kind of the thread we had going throughout.
And I completely forgot we've got 2 more left.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's quickly run through these. Obviously, as ever, we say to people at home, 5 whiskies is a lot on a school night, and also we're not going to do these 2 in as much detail. We're going to talk briefly about these. And should I dive in with Maclean's Nose, because I think this is a cool whiskey, and I shall try to explain why. It's I think if you tasted this after those 3 big whiskies, it maybe isn't going to do it justice. So I would save this for another day, or at least save some of it for another day. But this is a blend. We haven't had a Scotch blend actually on Pour and Sip for quite some time, which is an omission on our parts. We should have more, because they can be great. And this is one of the more exciting examples around at the moment. I think in fact, it's the tasting cards I know say it's 70% malt and 30% grain, which it is. And it's sort of the other way around, kind of more common. Like it's a really high malt percentage for a blend. But I've actually got the breakdown, which you can get on the QR code on the back of the bottle. So this batch used 40 bourbon barrels and 16 sherry hogsheads, which were from the West Highlands, which probably Arden Merkin, which is the distillery owned by Adelphi, who make this blend, and who featured in Pour and Sip, I think in August. So not long ago. 5 bourbon barrels from Campbelltown, so that's probably Glen Scotia you're talking there, and then 21 bourbon hogsheads of grain whiskey. So which if you start adding that up, I know hogsheads are slightly bigger than barrels, but it's almost like less than 30% grain. But yeah, you've got that sherry component, you've got high malt, you've got that influence from the sort of the coastal, slightly peated. It's delicious, and it's really good value. It's got a nice sort of old-fashioned bottle with like an illustration by a Scottish artist. It's kind of like, it's not trying to be too flash, but it's just great whiskey done well at a really, really affordable price point. I think with the pour and sip, like all of the whiskies that we've tasted tonight, you can get in the member store with a pour and sip discount. But I think that it takes this one down to like 28 quid, which is
that's pretty good, isn't it?
just like yeah.
What's so great about his nose, Maclean?
His nose. Yeah. So that it's an actual geographical landmark.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
It's near the distillery, right? But obviously, it's Charles Maclean as well, who's a famous whiskey expert, writer.
Sure.
But I think the story goes that it was Charles Maclean who said to the people at the distillery, you're now the distillery that's closest to my nose, and they didn't get it at first. They had to like work it out later. So it's like a double name. Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, let's I think it's about. Oh, actually, I did want to mention that if you know Ralphie at all, he's like a vlogger extraordinaire. That if you don't know him, he's
the OG. The OG.
Yeah, he sits in his bothy with his flat cap and I have actually met him because he lives in the Isle of Man. I've got family in the Isle of Man.
Oh, really?
But he made this his whiskey for the year, not of the year, for the year. But so there you go. Mean? I think it's just like he loves so much about it. Maybe it's not the best whiskey he's tasted in the entire year, but also it's the value of it, the sentiment of it. So it's the one he's putting forward for his whiskey for the year. There you go, little extra
nugget there. I just had a sip, previously of this next one we're doing, the Jimmy Rack Tennessee, the straight rye. Woo! It's powerful stuff. Bloody good as well. I really like it, and I knew I was gonna because I actually really liked the Daddy Rack that we'd had, the Tennessee, just their straight Tennessee whiskey, which was really nice as well. So I was actually really excited to try this one. And I just like them. I like the label. I like the whole thing with him. Arthur Rackham is his name. And this is their new whiskey, which is interesting. They called it Jimmy Rack and not Daddy Rack to keep that trend going. But anyway, we previously had their Tennessee whiskey on. This is their rye release. Interestingly, by law, rye must contain a mash bill of 51% minimum rye. This one has 95% rye in the mash bill. So if you like rye, this is going to be the one for you because it's really herbaceous, really vibrant. But also there's no corn in this at all. So the rest of it is made up of 5% malted barley, which is also quite cool. For anyone who knows, it's like the little thing about Tennessee whiskey that makes it Tennessee whiskey as well. That it needs to go through is the Lincoln County process, which is like a filter through charcoal after distillation, which mellows the taste even further. This has been aged for 3 years and 6 months in new American oak barrels. It's lightly toasted for that extra char level 3, I think it says, and double filtered through the maple charcoal, hand finished and double charcoal filtered. So it's very mellow. Apparently that they've tried to mellow it out, but it's pretty potent stuff. It's bottled at 61.6%. It is right. Have you tried it?
Yeah. It's an absolutely banger. Like it's great.
Honestly, that is just like that is. I absolutely love that. If you like rye, that is just great. It's got all that minerality about it. Just the finish is like it's just right there.
Yeah,
spicy into leather, but it's that lovely kind of nutty note as well.
I love rye anyway, but
Yeah.
yeah, I could drink that all day. But also, it's
Well, don't drink it all day, everybody.
no, I don't do that. But
this one is definitely not one to drink all day. But it's.
I was about to say it's like a bartender's dream. It literally says that on the tasting card as a quote. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I bet he wrote the tasting card. So was this my previous work, like a bartender's dream? Yeah, I can imagine that it would be. It's going to make a hell of a strong Manhattan, that one, or whatever you might want to use that for. But yeah, it's big stuff, and I like it. So anyway, that's it. Like I said, if you didn't get to try those 2 drams, don't worry about it. Just drink them another time. It's a lot on a school night to drink, and we encourage sipping and enjoying them at your leisure.
Indeed,
So,
yeah. Malcolm Tucker's just saying the last blend may have been... so he's saying in July we had the Loch Lomond Orchard Rebel, but even that was a blended malt. So it was a blend of different malt whiskies from different distilleries. Whereas, for a blended whiskey that blends together malt whiskey and grain whiskey from different distilleries, it's been a while. It's been a while since we have a Scotch one anyway.
I like this. It's Ali C saying the chimney rack is powerful stuff. Massive notes of fresh hay and anisey. The Nice finish, excellent. And Malcolm Tucker saying Jake showing his class, drinking straight from the bottle.
I had to have a little nip of that rye because it is, Andy was talking about it. It's great stuff. Yeah. I will be saving the rest for later.
Yeah. So that's it.
Let's bring people back on screen. Let's bring our wonderful guests back. So yeah, we've got Luke. Let's bring Luke back in. Alasdair, and then Fab. Yeah, Fab's just turned his camera back on, so we'll bring him back in too.
You did it right now. I said, did you just try those last 2? Have you managed to try those last 2 at all?
Yeah, I'm drinking the rye. It's amazing.
It's amazing, isn't it? Good stuff. So usually we do ask our pour and sippers if any of them. Well, basically, don't take offence from this because everyone answers, and we ask everyone what their favourite jam was of the evening. As we all know, whiskey is subjective, so there should be no favourite. But anyway, guys, it's a big presentation at the end for whoever is the winner, so you're obviously going to want to be the winner. So, guys, do let us know what your favourite from this box was tonight. I've got to say, tonight is going to be a tough one. I have to say, because that's one of the better boxes I've had. Not the box. By the way, the boxes are always good with pour and sip, but this one's been particularly good for me. So yeah, and guys, we always talk about our own whiskies, but what about other stuff that you've tried recently that you found was kind of interesting, or you drank and that's been amazing? One of my favourite whiskies I've tried recently. Alasdair, have you got anything that you tried recently?
Yeah, well, it was mentioned earlier that the heather smoke, the Stoney, that is something else. That's really good.
Yeah, we've had Stouting before, haven't we, on here, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, I'll look it up, but the members will be quicker than me. They've got their own database, which might. Honestly, they're on it. We had the El Clasico in June 2021. See, I do have it to hand, and that is a whiskey I love. That is
great whiskey and a great
vermouth casks, I think.
Football match usually. Fabrizio, what about your stuff? Anything you've tried recently? Well, you must try loads. It's a stupid question to ask for you because you just try loads of great stuff.
Yeah, I recently had and I guess everyone else on this call, well, at least from distilleries will know, but I had to give away a lot of our sample bottles just to friends, just being like, please take some away from me and enjoy them. But a couple of Irish distilleries we've been talking to recently just been put in touch, but Boan are 20 minutes north of Dublin Airport driving as well. How they've told me about it. We may or may not be doing something with them in the future, but also Blackwater, and they are down towards Waterford. Now I need to try and wrap my head around this, but the way Irish whiskey is made and the way kind of the laws have been all kind of dates back to when there was only a couple of Irish distilleries. And so there are certain mash bills to play around with, but preceding that and kind of before Scotch was king or queen, depending on who you're asking, and the column still and everything, Irish whiskey a very long time ago was huge and extremely prominent, and there were lots of distilleries and there were different types of mash bills. And so Boan and Blackwater are starting to bring back these previously used type of mash bills, moving away from what some of the bigger houses whiskey producers are making in Ireland. So they're just making some really exciting stuff. They're all very, very young. Kind of some of them are only releasing 3-year-old whiskies at the moment, but it's just, like I said earlier, I like whiskey with a story and just kind of really seeing people pushing the boundaries. So yeah, Boan and Blackwater, if you get a chance to try some stuff, really exciting.
We usually get these distilleries. They'll be on Pour and Sip soon. I'm telling you. Right, they sound like the kind of distilleries that we'll be interviewing soon. What about yourself, Luke?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to be at the Midlands sort of whiskey festival sort of last weekend. So managed to sort of sneaking a few additional drams, which was quite nice. One of the ones and stuff, I'll just find a little picture so people can see it because it's quite cool. But I was quite partial to. Let's have a little look. It was a Cadenhead's bottling. I don't know if you can kind of see that at all, if it makes sense or anything like that on the screen. Is it clear or is it not clear?
It's clear.
It's the other way around.
It's just the other way. So it was a 25-year-old Burnside. So one of 456 bottles and stuff like that. But that was a really sort of interesting one to sort of have it come from. We had quite a nice sort of comparable. One of the ones that we got was from the Gordon and MacPhail stable, which is a 25-year-old Raasay Glenlivet, otherwise known as Brayvell distillery and stuff like that people might be familiar with. And that was going back to that sort of big cask strength number, big sort of 60.1% ABV, but massive amounts of like grilled almost barbecue pineapple, sort of on the palate as well. So, really, really wonderful sort of tropical fruit note. So, yeah, a couple of really interesting ones from that. It's just nice, as I said, with any of the festivals, just to be able to sort of go around and sort of try what you can. But when you're on the other side of the the stand, as most people are well aware, you don't get to sort of whiz out and try too much. But yeah, there were a couple of standouts from recent.
We'll just wrap up with the other. So I just like that. Pexman said, "Wow, is right on the Jimmy rack." Again, everyone said talking about this. The Jimmy rack is good. Just had a sip, saving the rest for another night. So yeah, Jimmy rack's powerful stuff. Okay, let's go. Mike Pizarro, Benromach is my favourite, but what a great box. Okay, there you go. 1 point for you, Luke. We're not doing it. It's not
We're not doing
the Eurovision Song Contest. I don't usually do this. I'm just being stupid. Wow, what a fantastic 3 whiskies. Blown away tonight. When I tried the Raasay, I thought that's the one tonight. Then came the Cotswolds, came along. Something else. I put them both joint top. Malcolm Tucker, Isle of Raasay for me, but very hard to separate. Pexman, number 1, the Cotswolds, then the Benromach, the Raasay, but very tough choices. Great box as always. Didn't count the Jimmy rack in the rankings, but suspect that would have picked the others. Steve Howdy Doody. I still always wish that is your surname. It is, isn't it? It has to be. That's brilliant. Cotswolds for me. Clive Hampton. We've been really spoiled tonight. They were 3 beauts. It's a photo finish, and I think we should do it all again. You guys okay with that? You got Jeffster, Raasay for me, Ali C. Raasay, Jimmy Rack, Benromach, then Cotswolds. Saving the second half of Maclean's to try on a fresh palate. Paul Cruz, it's a close call for me, but the Raasay was my favourite. Ali C. saying Stanley's excellent stuff. A real boinger. From the first 3, Raasay wins by a narrow margin. I had a quick taste of the other 2, but both good. And the Tennessee is wow, indeed. Steve Coleman Williams, Cotswold wins for me, not a session dram, that made my brain work, which today, the bigger distraction is most welcome. Said goodbye to my cat today. I'm very sorry to hear that. Hope you're okay. Mike Pizarro. Now, I remember why I had to take a break. At least 3 bottles I could happily add to my collection this week. Again, remember, if you go onto the Pour and Sip store, you get any of these bottles with our lovely members discount. A couple more. Wild Eyed Bill. Wow, that's fantastic whiskey. It's blown away tonight. When I had the Raasay, I thought that's the one, and then tried the Cotswold. Amazing. Both of my joint best tonight. Steve Coleman Williams saying all 3 whiskies get 4 out of 5 on average on the database. Thank you to those who've rated. Oh, I didn't realise you gues were still doing that. Okay, so we've got our brilliant.
The official, unofficial
database,
yeah.
So you can rate. Okay, it's like the whiskey what should we call it, database?
Love it.
Yeah, that's great.
So anything you want to quickly shout out, Andy? What have you been drinking?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know really what I've had recently.
I'll tell you what I've been drinking if you like. While you have a thing.
Not over.
I've been thinking about Christmas cocktails. We're making Manhattans, right? So that's like chestnut Manhattans, and they're so good. So like you get Yeah, it's okay. In fact, I've got the recipe here. So it's 60 ml sort of high rye bourbon, 20 ml chestnut liqueur, 10 ml Punta Mess. So that's like vermouth, but like an Amaro vermouth. Couple of good shakes of Angostura bitters, and then I mean you can express an orange peel over that. You can put a cherry or a candied chestnut if you're feeling fancy in there. Like it's like Manhattan's, man. That's my Christmas drink.
Make one of those. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. I recently was lucky enough to go to an event, and I got to have 43-year-old Tamdu that they just released, and that was pretty goddamn special.
An everyday sipper.
Yeah, that's a real everyday sipper. Yeah. A session dram, as Steve Coleman Williams just put it. Anyway, I think we'll say thank you to everybody for joining us yet again. Jake, when will we be next back with Pour and Sip?
Ooh, it is. Let me scroll back up to the top of my sheet so we can get this right. We'll be back November 7th.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
November the 7th.
Steve, someone's asking if I actually got the candied chestnuts. Marron glaces. Get involved. Yeah.
One more Pour and Sip before the Christmas extravaganza. It's unbelievable.
Yes.
It's literally going to be Christmas time. Okay. Anyway, rambled on enough. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank you to all our guests. You've all been amazing tonight. It's been great listening to you guys. And just say thank you to everybody. Cheers.